Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of HFBC TV. How about that? I don't have any tree news this week, which is okay because I don't want to saturate you with tree news. But what we do have, a couple weeks ago we had Easter, right? And every year I always ask the question, how is the date of Easter determined? And so I want to ask that again this week. And if you get it, let's say you will, when you hear this, and that's the question, so you know the question, text it to Jacob or myself, and the first three that we get with the right answer will win. Are you ready for this? Looky there, Mother's Day cakes, yummy, made with strawberries. Yeah, made with strawberries. But always remember to look for the Little Debbie, because you know you'll get the right, or you'll get only real strawberries, no fake ones. So, text in the answer, how is the date of Easter determined? And we will see who wins that. So, we'll get started on the lesson.
One of my favorite movies growing up was Aladdin. The story of this guy that he gets locked in the cave of wonders, and it wasn't his fault, but he's stuck in the midst of that. And then he finds a lamp and he gets 3 wishes, right? And the story tells those 3 wishes. Well, that's kind of like what happens in the book of Job. Job gets thrown into this pit of suffering. And it wasn't really his fault, as we got to see in the first couple of lessons. And in the midst of this pain that Job is in, he's going to make 3 wishes. No, there's no genie involved in the lesson today. But out of the passages that we'll study, we'll see Job has these 3 wishes in the midst of his pain. Job's first wish is, he says, I wish I'd never been born.
Hey, you know what that reminds me of, Jacob? You remember George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life? You remember how at the end of that it kind of gets a little teary-eyed? I get a little sad. I start kind of crying and stuff. It makes me sad.
It's so sad.
And then the little girl in the little bell rings, she goes, you know, something about every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
The part at the end where his brother comes in, he says, "You are the richest man."
It's so sad.
Ew. So back to wish number 1. Wish number 1 is in chapter 3, and we'll read verse 1 through 4, and then we'll skip down a little bit later. It says, after all this pain, all of his friends have come. They are trying to comfort him. His wife has told him to curse God. After all of that, verse 1, Job began to speak, and he cursed the day he was born. He's saying, I wish I hadn't been born. This pain is so intense. He said, may the day I was born perish, and the night that said a boy is conceived. If only that day had turned to darkness. May God above not care about it, or light shine on it. Y'all, this is deep pain. Job is very, very honest with God about how he feels. He says, God, this pain is so intense, I can't handle it. I wish I had not been born. And it does remind me of that George Bailey in that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, where he says, I wish I'd never been born. All this pain is so much. And in that story, he realizes that if he'd never been born, God couldn't have done all these other wonderful things. Job 3:25, he says, for the thing I feared has overtaken me, and what I dreaded has happened to me. I cannot relax or be calm. I have no rest, for turmoil has come. So Job's first wish is, I wish I had never been born. I wish that all of this pain would never have happened to me. Some advice for us in the midst of this is we can take this type of pain to God. Jesus invites, he says, come to me all who are weary, and I will give you rest. And that may be what you need to do today. You've already got your lesson from God, that you could say, God, this is my pain. I wish I had never been born. I wish that this pain had never come to me. And you can bring that to your Father.
Okay, so wish number 2 is, wish you guys would just be quiet, right? You've probably heard that from your parents at some time. I know when I was young, I was kind of a chatterbox. You don't believe that? And my dad would say something like that. Maybe a little stronger, but something like, Jim, I wish you would just be quiet. And that's where we're at. So Job, he's suffering. He's surrounded by his three friends. And they are giving just the oversimplified view that Job, because of your sin, this is happening. So let's take a look. Bildad, one of the guys, says in Job 8, 5 and 6, but if you earnestly seek God and ask the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, then he will move even now on your behalf and restore the home where your righteousness dwells. So basically the summary is that God isn't answering your prayers, Job, because of your sin. That's what they are saying to him. And so here's what he says in Job 16, 2 and 3. He says, you are all miserable comforters. Is there no end to your empty words? And so Job has had enough of them constantly telling him that this is because of his sin. And so that's what he says. And so we can kind of learn a few things from this. That these friends today are no comfort, and that our friends sometime may not be any comfort to us. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they may not be. And sometimes it's just God, that he's the only one who can comfort us. Another lesson that we can learn from this is that we can be better listeners. As friends, a lot of times somebody wants to just talk, and we need to just listen. You remember the first part of this in last week's, when the friends first came, they sat for 7 days and 7 nights, and they didn't say a word. They just sat there with Job. And there's times that we need to do that we need to just sit and listen and wait for our friend who is in need to talk and listen to what they have to say.
So wish one, I wish I'd never been born. Wish two, I wish y'all would just be quiet. Wish number 3, okay? Wish number 3 is I wish I could just meet with God. Chapter 23, verse 3 says, if I only knew how to find him, he says, I wish I could find God so that I could go to his throne. Job still believes God is on his throne. I would plead my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn how he would answer me and understand what he would say. Job longs to go to God. Have you ever felt that way? Like something's happening in your life, and you say, I just wish I could meet with God. I wish that I could go and be close with him, share what's going, and listen to him. That's what Job is feeling. And then in chapter 28, Job 28, verse 8 through 10, Job says, if I go east, he is not there. If I go west, I cannot perceive him. When he is at work in the north, I can't see him. When he turns south, I cannot find him. He's saying every direction I look for God, I can't find him. Yet he knows the way I have taken. When he has tested me, I will emerge as pure gold. Job is saying, I can't find God, but I know God can find me. And that's good news for our souls this morning or tonight. Whenever you're watching this, that's good news for our souls, that God can find us. Now, have you ever taken like a road trip? My family, we drive to South Carolina a lot on the interstates, and we see a lot of semis. Have you ever seen on the back of semis, they have a sign that says, if I can't see you, you can't see me. And what they mean is, if I can't see you in my mirror on the side of the truck, then if you can't see me in that mirror, I can't see you. And what happens is if the car gets too close to the truck, you kind of disappear to the truck driver. And here's what's happening, I think, in Job's life, is God has come so close to Job that Job doesn't recognize God. If Job has blind spots, you have blind spots. But here's the good news, God does not have blind spots. God sees you wherever you are. God sees you in pain. God sees you in great times. God sees you.
Even though Job can't see, he trusts that God will take care of him. And so now as we're moving to Job, we'll look at 19. Job has a declaration of faith. He knows that he will get to meet God even if it's not in this lifetime. So here's what he says. This is 19, 25 through 27. But I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the end he will stand on the dust. Even after my skin has been destroyed, yet I will see God in my flesh. I will see him myself. My eyes will look at him and not as a stranger. So he shows that he has still got this faith that he knows God is there, he knows God is alive, and he knows that he will see him at some time, even if he doesn't get to right now, right? So he's looking forward to that after he dies, he knows for sure he'll see him then. And so just to kind of wrap that up, he wishes he had never been born. He wants his pain to be over with, right? Then he wishes his friends would just be quiet because they are just giving their opinion. They don't know. And then he wishes that he could see God. He wants God to speak to him, and he longs to hear God's voice. And so that's where we are right now. Moving on from here, in chapter 38, Job gets what he asked for.
So part 2 of the lesson today is Job gets his wish. We see that in Job chapter 38. Look at God's appearance to Job in Job 38 verse 1 through 3. Then the Lord answered Job. God speaks to Job. Job gets what he wants. God speaks to Job from the whirlwind. Remember back in chapter 1 and 2 where the whirlwind comes and destroys Job's kid's house. That's the same way that God appears to Job. So a couple things about verse 1. It says the Lord, the word for Lord there is Yahweh. This is the personal name for God. So God is coming to Job. It's wanting to emphasize that God comes to Job in a personal, relational way. But God also comes to Job in a powerful way. God comes in a whirlwind. The same thing that destroyed the house is the way that God is coming to Job right now. Maybe you can relate to Job. You can say, man, I feel like I've been suffering for 37 chapters too, and I wish I could hear from God. This passage shows and reveals the bigness of God. We need a big God so that we can have hope in the midst of our pain and in the midst of our suffering.
Okay, so here's who God shows that he is. And this is in Job 38. Talks about where he controls the land. I'm going to start with verse 4 through 7. He says, where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What supports its foundations? Or who laid its cornerstones? While the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So God is saying, I'm the one who did this. I'm the one who created the earth. And you weren't here and you didn't know. So who are you to question me? You know where he says that while the morning stars sang together, it's like God sang the earth into existence. And then all the sons of God, those are the angels that were there for that. And God's saying, I did these things. And he goes on to say in verse 8, this is where he controls the sea. He says, who enclosed the sea behind doors when it burst from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and total darkness its blanket. When I determined its boundaries and put its bars and doors in place. When I declared, you may come this far but no further. Your proud waves stop here. So think about that. If you've been to the ocean, I remember the first time I saw the ocean, we went over a hill and there it was. And it was this vast, enormous body of water that went as far as the eye could see. It's amazing. I remember just being amazed at seeing the ocean. And God is saying here, I made that. I made this amazing thing, but I stopped it where it's supposed to stop. And I stopped its waves where they're supposed to stop as well.
Chapter 39 continues, God showing Job how much he's in control. He talks about the animals. In verse 1, he says, do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Have you watched the deer in labor? Verse 9, he says, would the wild ox be willing to serve you, Job? Do you control these wild, powerful animals? Would the ox spend its night by your feeding trough? Verse 19 through 21, do you give strength to the horse, Job? Do you adorn the neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like a locust? His proud snorting fills one with terror. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He charges into battle. Do you control that, Job? And then in chapter 40, it says, the Lord answered Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? God is saying, you got anything? Am I doing any of this wrong, Job? What can you correct me? Let him who argues with God give an answer. Verse 3. Look at what Job says. Then Job answered the Lord, I am so insignificant. How can I answer you, God? I place my hand over my mouth. I've spoken once and I will not reply, twice, but I can add nothing. Job sees that he is so small. He sees that God is so big. And then we think, well, God's kind of shown that. But actually, God goes on for 2 more chapters. God says, right after that, he said, Job, adorn yourself with majesty and splendor and clothe yourself with honor and glory. Pour out your raging anger if you're God, Job. He says, look out on the proud person and humiliate him. He's saying, Job, you can't do this to people. You can't even humble proud people. He says, look on every proud person and humble him. Trample the wicked where they stand. God is helping Job to see his place. He's also helping Job to understand in a little bit more of a way how powerful God truly is.
Okay, so in chapter 40 and 41, it talks about a couple of animals called Behemoth and Leviathan. And we don't exactly know what they are, right? There's some speculation, but we know they're big animals, and they're things that Job would be afraid of. But God says, I am not afraid of those. I'm not afraid of anything. I created everything. And so you may be afraid, but to me, they're like pets. They're fine. Just like God's not afraid of coronavirus or anything else that we may face, because it is all his creation, right? And so we'll talk about that. I think we may do a lesson just on those 2 animals at some later time.
And then in chapter 42, verse 1 through 6, we see Job's response. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything. Do you believe that too? Do you believe God can do anything? And Job says, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. That's good news for us, that nothing that God wants to do can be stopped. He has good things planned for you, and that cannot be stopped. Even if it means going through difficult times, God's plan can't be stopped. And then in verse 3, Job says, you asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? And he says, surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous to me to know. When you said, listen, now I will speak. When I question you, you will inform me. Here's what he says. Job says, I have heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I reject my words and am sorry for them. I am in dust and ashes. Job says, you were right, God, and I submit to you, God.
Okay, so the closing of Job is chapter 42, 12 through 17. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter he named Jemima.
Isn't that syrup?
The second, Keziah.
No, it's kazoo. Kazoo.
And the third, Karen Happuch.
Bless you.
Thank you. Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so he died old and full of years. I love the way that ends, talking about how he died old and full of years. And so that kind of wraps up our story of Job.
I want to close with 3 things to encourage you, 3 challenges. The first one is keep on seeking God. God is so close to you. Even when you can't see him, he may be so close that you can't see him because he's so close to you. The second thing is be a friend who listens. We talked a lot about that last week, but your listening can be so powerful, especially in this time. You may need to call someone this week and just listen to them. Listen to what is going on in their life. Let them share. And the third thing that I want to encourage you is just to humbly pray for God's mercy. Maybe through this, God is revealing that you're not truly a believer, that you were just following God because your parents made you or because church was a rhythm, and God has shown you that you're not related to him, that you are his enemy. And if that's you, I would just ask you, please humbly ask for his mercy. He loves to forgive. He loves to bring us in and just say, God, I want to be part of your family. I want to be your child. Will you forgive me? I believe what you've done. Believe what Jesus has done. I believe I can be forgiven. Will you accept me as your child? Teenagers, parents, grandparents, you will have a Job moment in your life. You may say, well, Jacob, my life right now feels a lot like Job. You will face moments, just like Job, where you don't understand. You're in a lot of pain. And when that Job moment comes, you will have a choice. Will you lose your faith, or will you place your faith in the big God who's over all, in the big God who always does what's right, even when we don't understand? That will be your choice. There are discussion questions. I'm going to post them at the end. You can pause and discuss. If you're in our student ministry, you have received an email that has those questions as well. God bless you. Go in the peace of Christ.